Have you ever wondered why a stranger can walk into a room and instantly command respect, while another, speaking the exact same words, is entirely ignored? The answer lies not in the syllables vibrating in the air, but in the silent, ancient symphony of movement that precedes every spoken word. Long before humanity possessed the vocal apparatus to form complex sentences, survival depended entirely on the ability to read the subtle twitches, the tightening of a jaw, the sudden freezing of a posture, or the briefest flash of bared teeth. This primal language never vanished, it merely slipped beneath the surface of conscious awareness, completely drowned out by the noise of modern conversation. Yet, the human brain remains hardwired to process these visual cues with startling speed and ruthless accuracy. When a person steps onto a stage or enters a negotiation, a fierce biological scan occurs within the minds of the audience. The conscious mind listens to the polished pitch, the carefully crafted resume, or the practiced charm, but the subconscious mind is relentlessly interrogating the body. Is this person a threat? Are they submissive? Are they lying? The body always answers, and it never whispers, it screams. The tragedy of modern interaction is that most individuals walk through life entirely deaf to this screaming, trusting the easily manipulated facade of spoken language while remaining blind to the absolute truth radiating from the physical form. Consider the simple, everyday act of revealing the palms of the hands. In the brutal, unforgiving environments of early human history, an open hand was the ultimate proof of unarmed vulnerability. It silently communicated a lack of weaponry, a cessation of hostility, and an invitation for peaceful engagement. Millennia later, this instinct remains deeply embedded in the human psyche. When a person wishes to convey absolute honesty or submission, the palms naturally turn upward. Picture a child caught in a lie as they attempt to explain themselves away. Their hands will instinctively open, palms exposed to the interrogator, a biological plea for mercy and a desperate display of fabricated innocence. Conversely, watch a skilled negotiator or a charismatic leader who completely commands a room. They do not plead, they direct. When the palm is turned downward, it ceases to be an invitation and instantly transforms into an exertion of authority. The downward palm is a psychological weight pressing upon the recipient, demanding compliance. If an individual in a position of power issues a directive with an open, upward-facing palm, the request is perceived as a favor, a collaborative plea. But the moment that same hand rotates downward, the atmosphere shifts violently. The request becomes an absolute command, triggering an immediate, subconscious resistance in the listener, even if the spoken words remain polite. And when the hand closes into a fist, leaving only the index finger extended like a spear, it becomes one of the most universally irritating and aggressive gestures known to humanity. The pointed finger acts as a symbolic club, metaphorically beating the listener into submission. The psychological fallout from this simple gesture is profound. Audiences subjected to a speaker who constantly points at them will retain significantly less of the spoken information, their cognitive resources entirely hijacked by the primal need to defend against the perceived physical threat of the pointed finger. The lesson hidden within the hands is absolute. Trust is not granted by words. It is earned by the visible absence of hidden threats. This silent battle for dominance and trust is nowhere more evident than in the universally recognized ritual of the handshake. Originally a gesture designed to grasp the other person's weapon hand and shake loose any concealed daggers, the modern handshake has evolved into a concentrated, high-stakes psychological wrestling match. When two individuals lock hands, three specific subconscious attitudes are instantly transmitted: dominance, submission, or equality. Imagine a high-stakes corporate meeting where two rival executives meet for the first time. The doors open, they approach, and hands are extended. If one executive turns their hand so that the palm faces slightly downward during the grasp, they are executing the upper hand thrust. This is not an accident, it is a calculated, often unconscious, biological declaration of superiority. The downward-facing hand forces the recipient's hand into the upward, submissive position. In that split second of physical contact, before a single greeting is uttered, the power dynamic of the entire relationship is established. The person whose hand is forced upward instantly feels a subtle wave of intimidation, a quiet biological concession of defeat. But the story does not end there. If the recipient is equally dominant, they will violently resist this physical subjugation. They will instinctively step into the personal space of the aggressor, bringing their left leg forward to anchor their stance, and twist the handshake back into a vertical, equalized position. This maneuver is a silent declaration of war, a refusal to be dominated. When both hands remain perfectly vertical, a mutual respect is born. It is the physical manifestation of a truce. Yet, the world is filled with individuals who unknowingly sabotage their own authority with the dead fish handshake. A cold, clammy, lifeless grasp instantly communicates profound weakness, a lack of character, and deep-seated insecurity. The recipient of such a handshake is biologically repulsed, their subconscious mind interpreting the lack of physical tension as a severe lack of emotional and professional fortitude. The mastery of the handshake is not merely about a firm grip. It is about the acute awareness of palm direction, the exact amount of pressure, and the strategic invasion of space. It is the first, and often the most critical, test of character. Beyond the hands, the face serves as the ultimate billboard of human emotion, but it is also the most practiced liar. From childhood, individuals are trained to manipulate their facial muscles to conform to social expectations. They are taught to smile when greeting a stranger, to look interested when bored, and to hide their contempt behind a mask of polite agreeableness. However, the body possesses a fail-safe mechanism, a built-in lie detector that separates the fabricated emotion from the genuine experience. This mechanism resides in the delicate muscles surrounding the eyes. Consider the ubiquitous social smile, the one plastered across the faces of service workers, politicians, and polite acquaintances. This smile is entirely voluntary, controlled by the conscious brain, and it involves only the zygomatic major muscles that pull the corners of the mouth backward. It is a biological mask. The mouth smiles, but the upper half of the face remains completely dead. The subconscious mind of the observer instantly detects this incongruity. A warning signal flashes. This person is not experiencing genuine joy, this is a transaction. Now, contrast this with a genuine display of happiness. A true smile, an eruption of authentic delight, cannot be consciously manufactured. It requires the involuntary contraction of the orbicularis oculi muscles, which cause the eyes to narrow and the skin at the corners of the eyes to crinkle into crow's feet. When a person genuinely smiles, their entire face illuminates, the eyebrows dip slightly, the cheeks push upward, and the eyes sparkle with uncontrollable emotion. The presence of these crinkles is the absolute guarantee of sincerity. When an observer witnesses a genuine smile, their own mirror neurons fire, creating an immediate, irresistible bond of trust and mutual affection. The inability to fake the contraction of the eye muscles means that the face, despite all its training in deception, will always betray the truth to those who know exactly where to look. The physical environment and how a person occupies it further reveals the hidden architecture of human relationships. Every individual carries around themselves a portable, invisible bubble of space, a personal territory that they will aggressively defend. The size of this bubble is dictated by cultural upbringing and the density of the population they reside in. But the biological reaction to its invasion is universal. Imagine a crowded elevator or a packed train carriage. Watch as strangers are forced into each other's intimate zones, a space usually reserved exclusively for lovers, close family, and intimate friends. The reaction is immediate and highly structured. Eye contact is strictly avoided. Staring at a stranger in this proximity is an act of blatant aggression. Bodies become rigid, movements are minimized, and faces go completely blank, masking any sign of emotion. This is a biological defense mechanism, a temporary shutting down of the social self to survive the psychological trauma of territorial invasion. When a person willingly allows another into their intimate space, it is the ultimate silent declaration of trust. But when an aggressive salesperson, a dominant boss, or a socially unaware acquaintance deliberately steps into this zone without permission, the physiological response in the victim is identical to an impending physical attack. Heart rate spikes, adrenaline floods the system, and blood rushes to the muscles in preparation for a fight or flight response. The victim may attempt to mask their discomfort with a polite smile, but their body will betray them. They will lean away, cross their arms to create a physical barrier, or subtly angle their torso toward the nearest exit. The invader, oblivious to the screaming signals of distress, continues their pitch, entirely unaware that they have completely destroyed any possibility of rapport. The mastery of spatial awareness is the mastery of human comfort. It requires the acute sensitivity to recognize when to step forward to build intimacy and when to step back to grant psychological breathing room. The failure to respect this invisible boundary is the fastest route to destroying a relationship before a single word of substance is even exchanged. As the silent negotiation continues, the body begins to deploy its barricades. The human form is exceptionally vulnerable. The vital organs exposed in the center of the chest and abdomen. When a person feels threatened, insecure, or simply negative about the information they are receiving, the brain's immediate, primitive command is to protect these vital areas. This instinct manifests in the universal gesture of folded arms. Imagine an audience seated in an auditorium, listening to a speaker present a controversial new idea. As the speaker introduces a concept that clashes with the audience's deeply held beliefs, a wave of motion ripples through the room. One by one, arms are brought across the chest, hands tucking under biceps, creating a solid wall of bone and muscle between themselves and the speaker. This is not merely a comfortable way to sit, it is a physical manifestation of a closed mind. The folded arms act as a psychological shield, deflecting the speaker's words. Studies have definitively proven that when a person listens with folded arms, their retention of the information drops drastically, and their internal monologue becomes overwhelmingly critical. The longer the arms remain folded, the deeper the negative attitude becomes entrenched. A skilled communicator recognizes this physical barricade instantly and knows that continuing to speak is entirely futile. The barrier must be broken before the mind can be opened. They will shift their strategy, perhaps handing the person a physical object, asking them to write something down, or inviting them to lean forward to inspect a visual aid. The moment the arms are uncrossed to reach for the object, the physical barrier drops, and the psychological resistance instantly begins to melt away. The connection between physical posture and mental state is absolutely reciprocal, just as a negative thought causes the arms to fold. Forcing the arms to unfold can actually dissipate the negative thought. Similarly, the legs serve as powerful indicators of hidden intent and hidden fears. While the upper body is meticulously trained to lie and perform, the lower body is largely left unsupervised by the conscious mind. The legs and feet point toward where the mind truly wants to go. In a social gathering, observe a group of 3 people engaged in conversation. From the waist up, they may all appear equally invested, smiling and nodding in perfect harmony. But look at their feet. If 2 individuals have their feet pointed directly at each other, while the third person's feet are pointed toward the door or another group, the dynamic is entirely exposed. The 2 facing each other have formed a closed, intimate loop. They are deeply engaged in each other's presence. The third person, despite their polite smiles and verbal participation, is biologically desperate to escape. Their body is literally preparing to walk away. Furthermore, when the legs are crossed, particularly in the figure 4 position where one ankle rests on the opposite knee, a distinct attitude of competitiveness and argumentative resistance is formed. This posture, often adopted by men in negotiations, transforms the body into a tightened spring, signaling a refusal to compromise. If the person then grasps the crossed leg with their hands, physically locking it into place, the resistance becomes absolute. They have clamped their attitude shut, and no amount of logical persuasion will penetrate their defenses until that physical lock is broken. The legs, far away from the manipulative control of the brain, are the most honest appendages of the human body, silently broadcasting the true desires of the subconscious. The ultimate pinnacle of silent communication, however, is the phenomenon of mirroring. When 2 individuals share a deep rapport, when they are entirely in sync and comfortable with one another, their bodies begin to execute a flawless, unconscious choreography. They become physical echoes of each other. If one leans forward, the other leans forward. If one picks up a glass, the other reaches for theirs. If one shifts their weight, the exact same shift occurs across the table seconds later. This physiological synchrony is the ultimate biological proof of mutual trust and agreement. It is the body's way of saying that there is total alignment. In a highly successful negotiation or a deeply romantic encounter, this mirroring happens effortlessly, a beautiful, invisible dance of mutual understanding. But in the hands of a skilled observer, mirroring becomes a potent tool for actively engineering trust. By consciously and subtly adopting the posture, gestures, and breathing rate of a stranger, a person can artificially trigger the biological sensations of rapport in the other person's brain. The stranger's subconscious mind detects the similarities, the alarm bells of caution are silenced, and a feeling of warmth and connection is spontaneously generated. Yet, this must be executed with absolute precision, for if the mirroring becomes too obvious, it transforms into mockery, instantly shattering the trust it was meant to build. The silent language of the body is vast, complex, and brutally honest, a constant stream of undeniable truth flowing beneath the shallow waters of human conversation. The seamless choreography of mirroring eventually gives way to the most piercing and intense form of nonverbal communication known to the human species, the gaze. The eyes are not merely passive receivers of light, they are active, potent projectors of intent, dominance, submission, and raw emotion. When two individuals lock eyes, a high-speed neurological exchange occurs, bypassing conscious thought and striking directly at the amygdala, the brain's primal threat and emotional processing center. In the predatory wild, a prolonged, unblinking stare is the universal precursor to an attack. It is a biological lock-on, a signal that the target has been selected and violence is imminent. Consequently, the human nervous system reacts to an intense stare with an immediate surge of adrenaline. In the modern boardroom or the crowded subway car, a sustained gaze from a stranger triggers the exact same evolutionary alarm bells. The heart accelerates, the muscles tense, and the mind races to assess the level of danger. Yet, the mastery of eye contact is the ultimate weapon in the arsenal of the persuasive communicator. The difference between a gaze that terrorizes and a gaze that mesmerizes lies entirely in the specific geography of the face upon which the eyes rest. When an individual seeks to establish unyielding authority, to dominate a negotiation or deliver a reprimand, they deploy the business gaze. This is a cold, calculated focal point directed exclusively at the triangular area formed by the recipient's eyes and the center of their forehead. By keeping the gaze anchored in this upper region, the sender projects an aura of immense seriousness and unshakable control. The recipient, feeling the weight of this focused attention on their forehead, instinctively experiences a subtle but undeniable drop in their own perceived power. The environment chills, the atmosphere becomes strictly professional, and the biological hierarchy is instantly reinforced without a single command being spoken. However, to maintain this gaze too long is to invite rebellion, for the line between dominance and aggression is perilously thin. In stark contrast to the freezing power of the business gaze is the warmth and connectivity of the social gaze. When the intention is to build rapport, to foster friendship, or to create a safe, collaborative environment, the eyes must drop below the brow line. The social gaze wanders gently within the triangle formed by the eyes and the mouth. This is the realm of empathy, the visual territory of active listening and mutual respect. When a person looks into this zone, the primal alarm systems of the recipient remain completely dormant. The interaction is perceived as non-threatening, allowing the conscious mind to fully engage with the spoken words rather than desperately monitoring for danger. It is in this visual space that true alliances are forged, where the gentle nodding of the head and the soft focus of the eyes weave a silent tapestry of trust. But the eyes possess an even deeper, more intoxicating secret, one that operates entirely outside the realm of conscious control and plunges directly into the chaotic depths of human attraction. This is the intimate gaze, a visual sweep that begins at the eyes and cascades downward, sweeping across the chin, the neck, and resting upon the chest or lower body. When a person is genuinely captivated, biologically drawn to another, this sweeping gaze occurs instinctively, a silent appraisal of the other's physical form. If the attraction is mutual, the recipient will return the intimate gaze, their pupils dilating in a microscopic, involuntary explosion of desire. The pupil is the ultimate betrayer of emotion. In states of high arousal, whether from fear, anger, or intense sexual attraction, the pupils expand drastically, drinking in as much visual information as possible. A skilled observer, a master of the silent language, watches the pupils of their counterpart closer than they listen to their words. A sudden dilation during a business pitch reveals an unspoken excitement, a hidden greed, or a desperate need for the deal. A sudden constriction, narrowing the eyes to a reptilian slit, screams of suspicion, hostility, or outright rejection. The conscious mind can force a smile, but it is utterly powerless to command the size of the pupil. This profound inability of the body to perfectly mask its true intentions is never more tragically spectacular than when a person attempts to utter a deliberate falsehood. The act of lying is a monumental cognitive burden. The brain must simultaneously suppress the truth, invent a plausible fiction, monitor the listener's reaction, and control the entire physical form to maintain the illusion of honesty. It is an impossible task, and under this immense neurological stress, the body inevitably fractures, leaking a torrent of involuntary signals that expose the deception. The most famous of these physical betrayals is known as the Pinocchio effect. When a lie is spoken, the physiological stress triggers a sudden rush of blood to the extremities, particularly the delicate tissues of the nose. This sudden engorgement causes a microscopic swelling and an intense, localized tingling sensation. The liar, entirely unaware of the biological mechanism at play, is suddenly struck by an overwhelming, irresistible urge to scratch their nose. The hand flies upward, a fleeting, desperate attempt to soothe the physiological itch caused by the psychological stress. This rapid nose touch is the smoking gun of deception, but the body's attempts to sabotage the lie do not stop there. As the false words spill from the lips, the subconscious mind, deeply ashamed of the deceit, will often command the hand to literally cover the mouth. An ancient, infantile attempt to physically block the lie from escaping into the world. In adults, this gesture is often disguised as a subtle cough, a brush of the upper lip, or a finger placed thoughtfully over the mouth. But the underlying motivation remains identical. The brain is attempting to choke the falsehood back down. The hands become frantic, restless traitors. They may drift to the neck, scratching at a sudden, stress-induced itch beneath the collar, or they may violently rub the eye. A subconscious attempt to break visual contact with the victim of the lie and avoid the crushing weight of their gaze. The liar's body is a battlefield, a war between the conscious intention to deceive and the subconscious desperate need to confess. The legs will twitch, eager to carry the liar away from the scene of the crime. The breathing will become shallow and rapid as the fight or flight system engages, and the voice, strangled by the tension in the vocal cords, will inevitably rise in pitch. The tragedy of the liar is that they believe their words are their armor, completely blind to the fact that their own flesh and bone are screaming their guilt to anyone trained to listen. Yet, the body's capacity for revelation is not limited to deception. It is equally, if not more, explosive in the arena of human courtship. The silent dance of attraction is a primal, high-stakes ritual, played out in coffee shops, boardrooms, and crowded bars across the globe, following biological scripts written millions of years ago. When a woman enters a room and spots a potential mate, her body immediately begins a complex symphony of preparation and display. The posture shifts dramatically, the spine straightens, pushing the chest forward and tilting the hips, an unconscious exaggeration of reproductive viability. The hands, ever the instruments of subtle communication, begin the ritual of preening. Fingers drift to the hair, smoothing a lock or tossing it over the shoulder in a fluid, mesmerizing motion designed to catch the male's peripheral vision. This is not mere vanity, it is a calculated, biological broadcast of availability and health. She may unconsciously expose the soft, highly vulnerable skin of her inner wrists, a powerful signal of submission and trust, offering a silent invitation for approach. The most potent weapon in her nonverbal arsenal, however, is the sideways glance, over a raised shoulder, accompanied by a fleeting, enigmatic smile. This look is the ultimate coy provocation. It triggers an ancient, irresistible pursuit instinct in the male brain, an evolutionary command that is almost impossible to ignore. The man, in response, executes his own instinctual choreography. His body expands, seeking to occupy as much physical space as possible to project dominance and protective capability. He will stand taller, his chest inflated, his movements becoming deliberately slower and more controlled. The classic male courtship display involves hooking the thumbs into the belt loops, fingers pointing directly downward toward the genital region. This aggressive, utterly subconscious gesture is the human equivalent of a peacock unfurling its feathers. A silent, arrogant declaration of virility and territorial ownership. As the distance between the two closes, the mirroring begins. The angle of the head, the rhythm of the breathing, the placement of the hands on the table, all synchronize in a flawless, silent duet. If she crosses her legs, tilting them toward him, she is opening the gate to her personal space. If she dangles a shoe from her toes, the rhythmic swinging is a hypnotic display of comfort and high arousal. The spoken words exchanged during this ritual are entirely irrelevant. They are merely the background music to the roaring biological conversation happening below the surface. The tragedy of modern romance is how often individuals obsess over the perfect opening line, agonizing over syllables, while entirely missing the symphony of acceptance or the deafening alarms of rejection broadcast by the body sitting inches away. This primal urge to claim and defend territory extends far beyond the mating dance, penetrating every aspect of human social and professional interaction. The concept of ownership is not merely a legal construct, it is a deeply embedded biological imperative. Humans claim space exactly as predators claim a hunting ground, though the markers are slightly more civilized. When a person occupies a desk, a favorite chair, or even a temporary spot at a public table, they immediately begin to expand their invisible boundaries. They will spread their belongings, a coat, a notebook, a coffee cup, creating a physical perimeter around their chosen domain. This is the barricade. If a stranger encroaches upon this perimeter, moving a pen or brushing against a coat, the physiological reaction in the owner is identical to a physical assault. The heart rate spikes, the jaw clenches, and the body prepares to defend its territory. In the corporate arena, this territorial instinct is the foundation of power dynamics. The size of the office, the elevation of the chair, the placement of the desk, all are meticulously calculated weapons in the silent war for dominance. The boss does not sit behind a massive mahogany desk simply for practical reasons. The desk is a fortress, a physical barrier that visually and psychologically separates the commander from the subordinates. When an employee is summoned to sit in the small, low chair placed precisely on the opposite side of that massive desk, they are biologically disadvantaged before the conversation even begins. They are entering hostile territory, completely exposed, while the boss remains protected behind a wall of wood. The master of spatial dominance understands that true power is not always about hiding behind a barricade. It is often about invading the space of others with total impunity. The dominant figure will lean over a subordinate's desk, placing their hands flat on the surface, invading the personal zone and physically trapping the individual in their chair. This is a devastating display of superiority, a silent declaration that the subordinate's territory is entirely conditional and can be breached at will. Even the simple act of touching an object belonging to another, picking up their stapler, examining their family photo, is a subtle assertion of ownership over the person themselves. The silent language of power is ruthless, unyielding, and completely detached from the polite fictions of corporate equality. It operates on the ancient laws of the jungle, where the one who commands the space commands the mind, and the one who retreats is eternally subjugated to the will of the dominant force. The relentless observation of these territorial skirmishes reveals the true hierarchy of any group, exposing the hidden kings and the silent victims long before an organizational chart is ever drawn. As the narrative of human interaction unfolds, the body continues its relentless, silent commentary, evaluating every nuance, every shift in power, and every fleeting emotion. The tragedy and the triumph of the human condition are written not in the ink of our documents, but in the sweat of our palms, the dilation of our pupils, and the frantic, subconscious twitching of our muscles. We are biologically incapable of keeping our own secrets. The conscious mind may build towering fortresses of logic, construct elaborate facades of professionalism, and weave intricate webs of deceit. But the body remains forever anchored to the brutal, undeniable truth of the present moment. It is the eternal whistleblower, the uncompromising witness to the deepest terrors and the most profound desires that we desperately attempt to conceal. To master this language is to strip away the mask of the world. To walk through a society of the blind with eyes wide open, seeing the raw, pulsing reality of human intention that lies shimmering just beneath the skin. It is a power that demands profound responsibility. For to read the body is to possess the soul, to know the unspoken vulnerabilities of every person who crosses your path. The journey into the depths of nonverbal communication is not merely an accumulation of psychological tricks. It is a terrifying and exhilarating descent into the very core of what it means to be human. A relentless pursuit of the absolute truth that is forever broadcasting in the silence. The journey from observing isolated twitches to mastering the silent symphony of human interaction requires a profound paradigm shift. The amateur observer, newly armed with a fragmented dictionary of gestures, often falls into the catastrophic trap of the single signal error. They spot a crossed arm and instantly declare the presence of defensive hostility, entirely failing to notice the plummeting temperature of the room or the sheer physical exhaustion etched into the subject's face. The master of nonverbal communication, however, understands that a single gesture is merely a lonely letter in the vast alphabet of the body. To read the true narrative, one must look for the clusters, the intricate sentences constructed by the simultaneous alignment of posture, facial expression, and micro-movements. The rule of three becomes the golden standard. No physical tell can be considered a definitive psychological truth unless it is corroborated by at least two other supporting signals. Imagine the high-stakes theater of a multi-million-dollar financial negotiation, a brutal arena where fortunes are made and shattered on the invisible fault lines of human confidence. The titan of industry sits across the polished mahogany table, his words painting a picture of absolute financial solvency and aggressive expansion. He speaks of limitless wealth. Yet the master negotiator watches the hidden orchestra of his body. The titan's left eye exhibits a microscopic twitch, a flutter of the orbicularis oculi that betrays sudden, intense cognitive stress. A fraction of a second later, his hand drifts to adjust the impeccable knot of his silk tie. A classic pacifying gesture designed to soothe the sudden constriction of the throat under pressure. Finally, beneath the table, entirely out of conscious awareness, his right foot locks tightly around the leg of his chair, anchoring him against an invisible psychological storm. The words scream absolute financial dominance, but the cluster of physical evidence whispers a terrifying truth: the titan is overleveraged. Desperate, and completely terrified of the impending deal. By reading the cluster, the negotiator strips away the illusion of wealth and exposes the bleeding vulnerability beneath the bespoke suit, gaining an insurmountable tactical advantage. This is the devastating power of contextual observation, the ability to synthesize the entire human form into a single, undeniable emotional broadcast. Yet, even the most flawlessly interpreted cluster can lead to catastrophic ruin if the observer is blind to the invisible borders of cultural conditioning. The silent language, while built on a universal foundation of biological imperatives, is heavily accented by the geography of one's upbringing. The global stage is a minefield of nonverbal misunderstandings, where a gesture of profound respect in one hemisphere can instantly transform into a declaration of war in another. Consider the ubiquitous ring gesture, the thumb and forefinger joined to form a circle, universally recognized in the West as an absolute confirmation that everything is perfect. But deploy this exact same configuration in the bustling markets of southern France, and it violently translates to the concept of zero or worthless, instantly insulting the merchant and destroying the transaction. Carry that same gesture to the shores of the Mediterranean or parts of South America, and it devolves further into a graphic, unpardonable obscenity. The physical movement is completely identical, only the psychological software of the observer has changed. Similarly, the concept of personal space expands and contracts violently across the globe. Two businessmen from the crowded, tactile cultures of Latin America or the Middle East will stand comfortably inches apart, bathing in each other's exhaled breath. interpreting the physical proximity as a necessary foundation for absolute trust. But place a stoic Northern European or a reserved North American into this exact same intimate zone, and their biological alarms will scream. They will perceive the closeness not as friendship, but as an aggressive, suffocating invasion, instinctively retreating backward in a desperate bid for psychological oxygen. This physical retreat, in turn, is interpreted by the tactile culture as coldness, suspicion, and a blatant refusal to engage. The deal dies not because of a failure of logic, but because of a devastating collision of invisible spatial boundaries. The ultimate communicator must strip away their own cultural assumptions and become a nonverbal chameleon, acutely aware that the meaning of a gesture is entirely hostage to the soil upon which it is performed. The necessity for this chameleon-like mastery is never more urgent than in the modern arena of digital broadcasting and public performance. We exist in an era where an individual can stand alone in a silent room, staring into the lifeless glass lens of a camera, and simultaneously project their presence into the minds of millions. In this sterile, disembodied environment, the physical form becomes the absolute anchor of authenticity. The audience may be invisible, but their collective, subconscious scrutiny is incredibly magnified. When a content creator or a public speaker steps into the digital spotlight, every microscopic hesitation, every forced smile, and every nervous shift of weight is captured, compressed, and broadcast to an audience perfectly hardwired to detect deception. If the speaker's vocal tone is pitched with enthusiastic excitement, but their hands remain rigidly frozen at their sides and their torso is angled slightly away from the lens, the audience experiences an immediate, profound cognitive dissonance. The conscious mind hears the excitement, but the ancient, reptilian brain senses the physical retreat and instantly flags the performance as a fabricated lie. The digital audience will abandon a video not because the information is flawed, but because the speaker's physical broadcast is fundamentally out of sync with their verbal message. To conquer the camera, the speaker must force a total synchronization of mind and body. They must utilize open palm gestures to invite the unseen masses into their narrative. They must employ the precise, rhythmic chop of the hand to underscore critical data points, and they must maintain a piercing, unwavering visual lock on the lens, treating the cold glass as the very soul of their most intimate confidant. When the physical performance perfectly mirrors the passion of the spoken word, the screen dissolves, the geographical distance evaporates, and the speaker achieves an almost hypnotic, magnetic resonance with a global audience. The mastery of body language is the ultimate currency of influence in a world desperately starved for genuine connection. As the intricate tapestry of human movement is finally unraveled, a profound philosophical truth emerges from the chaos of twitches, stares, and physical barricades. The meticulous study of nonverbal communication is often initially pursued as a weapon, a desperate attempt to gain an edge in negotiations, to decipher the hidden motives of rivals, or to manipulate the affections of potential lovers. It is born of a desire to control the unpredictable, terrifying variable of the human animal. But as the practitioner delves deeper into the silent language, as they learn to quiet their own mind and truly observe the subtle, involuntary agonies and joys of the bodies surrounding them, the weapon inevitably transforms into a profound instrument of empathy. To see the nervous, self-soothing stroke of a neck, the sudden, protective crossing of the arms, or the desperate, fleeting search of a widened eye is to witness the naked, unshielded vulnerability of the human soul. It is the realization that behind every facade of corporate arrogance, social indifference, or fiery anger, there is a frightened, biological creature desperately seeking safety, validation, and connection. The true master of body language does not use this knowledge to destroy or to dominate, but to heal the fractures in human communication. They see the fear before it is spoken. They recognize the lie as a shield for a hidden pain, and they adjust their own physical presence to grant psychological sanctuary to those who are suffering in silence. They become the ultimate architects of trust, capable of disarming the most hostile adversary not with the overwhelming force of logic, but with the quiet, devastating power of perfect, unspoken understanding. The entire sprawling, complex vocabulary of the human form is ultimately dedicated to a single, Relentless biological pursuit, the desperately sought. Deeply terrified need to be truly seen. The core message of this silent symphony is an undeniable truth that transcends language, culture, and time. The body cannot lie, and in its brutal honesty, we find the only true path to understanding one another.